Hello everyone, in this short video I will be presenting the article titled The Pre-Registration Revolution by Nosek and colleagues. As the title indicates, the article revolves around the benefits of pre-registration of research studies. Two central terms discussed in the article are prediction and post-diction. Post-diction is the interpretation of data to generate a hypothesis and then explain why something occurred, whereas prediction requires a collection of data to test hypothesis. In prediction, data is used to confront the possibility that the prediction might be wrong, whereas in post-diction, data is already known and is used to explain reasoning behind the occurrence of some phenomena. The authors mention that the distinction between these two concepts is important because otherwise post-diction can be presented as prediction and inflate the likelihood of believing that there is evidence for something when it is actually not there. They identify it is common for research to alternate between the two, and this leads to circular reasoning where a hypothesis is generated based on some data and then the same data set is used to validate the hypothesis. They refer to some common practices in academia which lead to such behavior. These are rewarding positive results more than negative results and rewarding clean results that provide a strong narrative than that which shows uncertainty. But these are rare events in science, and scientific research is halting, messy, and uncertain. The systemic incentives for such results create a potential conflict for the researcher, and then they are wrongly motivated to obtain results that are more attractive than accurate. One approach for tackling the problem of distinguishing post-diction versus prediction is to encourage and mainstream pre-registration. Pre-registration means committing to analytic steps without advanced knowledge of the research outcomes, and the commitment is usually accomplished by posting the analysis plan to an independent registry such as the Open Science Foundation website. The authors argue that inferences from pre-registered studies will be more reproducible than those which were not pre-registered, since the relationship between the analysis choices and findings cannot be influenced by motivation, memory, or reasoning biases. Let us look at the ideal scenario for a pre-registration study. A scientist makes an observation and generates a hypothesis. Then a study design and analysis plan is created to evaluate the hypothesis. Then relevant data is collected and analyzed according to the plan. This confronts the hypothesis by testing whether it predicts the outcomes of the experiment or not. After that, data is further explored for potential discoveries that can generate new hypotheses and provide potential explanations after the fact. The interesting post-predictions in that case are converted to predictions for designing the next study. Now, the ideal scenario for pre-registration is not easy to implement, and the researcher might face challenges while trying to do so. The authors list some common challenges faced by researchers and how they can be addressed. Let's quickly go over these one by one. The first challenge is that of deviations from the original plan of data collection and analysis, which is a common occurrence since even the best laid out plans are difficult to achieve in the real world. The authors say that in such cases, the researchers should transparently report any changes and the reasoning behind them, which can help the observers in assessing the deviations and their explanations. The second challenge is that of assumption violations, which cannot be identified until the data is collected. The authors mention that in such cases, data analysis techniques should be used and those that do not undermine the diagnostic power of statistical inference. Other strategies could include defining stages and pre-registering incrementally, pre-registering a decision tree, and blinding the dataset, and establishing standard operating procedures for handling observed data. The third challenge is that of a case where data is pre-existing, as in when research is conducted on secondary data. In that case, pre-registration is still possible if no researcher involved in the study has observed the data in any way. This includes not reading any summary report or receiving any advice on how to approach the analysis from someone who has observed the data previously. The next challenge is associated with longitudinal and large multivariate datasets, where it is not possible to pre-register the entire design and analysis plan of all future publications from the onset of the project. In such cases, the authors advise pre-registering new observations at different stages and following previous recommendations on having decision trees and standard operating procedures. Next, they talk about the challenge of having many experiments in the same study where data is collected frequently, and pre-registration of every experiment will make the process inefficient and require more resources. In such cases, the authors recommend preparing a pre-registration template with clearly defined parameters and protocols which only need to be changed or manipulated for successive experiments. The next case is that of a program of research where the nature of research is as such that most outcomes yield null results and the positive results with huge implications are rare. In such cases, it is important that the analysis plan must be defined blind to the outcomes, but all outcomes, even those which were not positive, be reported to avoid any selective reporting. The seventh challenge is that when researchers are doing exploratory work and do not have a lot of predictions, then pre-registration might not seem very useful. However, the authors recommend that while at the initial stages there might be no predictions, but in the long run it is unlikely that the research project will remain exploratory. Pre-registration will help both exploratory research and testing predictions during the iterative research process. Next, the challenge is about a case when there are multiple competing predictions, but again that can be addressed by including them in the plan that is pre-registered. Prediction research can hold multiple predictions simultaneously as well. Finally, when researchers find some predictions yielding more interesting results than others, in that case, the researchers would like to focus the narrative more on those interesting results than others. Here, the authors recommend addressing this statistically, but also pre-registration does not prevent researchers from taking control of their narrative as long as it does justice to the evidence and conclusions are not inferred from beyond what the data says. In conclusion, the authors recommend making pre-registration the norm, and that many researchers are familiar with aspect of pre-registration as they are required to submit details of their methods and analysis when writing grant applications and ethics applications. They mention that even though existing culture has not offered many incentives for the rigor and reproducibility, but the trend is changing. For example, pre-registration is required by US law for clinical trials and is necessary to be published in journals that adhere to the International Committee of Medical Journal Editors policy. Many journals and funders are signatories to the Transparency and Openness Promotion guidelines that define standards for transparency and reproducibility, including pre-registration. Additionally, the pre-registration challenge offers $1,000 awards to researchers that publish the results of a pre-registered study, so look out for that. Journals also facilitate pre-registration by offering publishing models, and there is evidence for cultural shift as over 8,000 pre-registrations were registered on the Open Science Framework at the time of the writing of this article. So that's about it. I hope you seriously consider pre-registration for your research studies. Thank you.